The event is neutral. Life doesn't make you think about it. Life is neutral. Bacteria are neutral. Car crashes are neutral. Cancer is neutral. Cancer is just the body trying to heal itself, but it's kind of something's gone wrong. But, you know, again, it's our thinking about life gives us our experience of life. Hold on a minute. That's huge. Wait, stop the press. What? Say that again. That's kind of that was the scratch record effect when I heard that. It was like, oh, hold on, wait. What? Say that bit again. Life is neutral, but it's our thinking about life that gives us it. Oh my goodness, that's a game changer, because all of a sudden, responsibility, the ability to respond, goes from life to me. Right? I've taken back power. It's like, oh, I could have a different experience about this.
Välkommen till podden Human Change med Daniel Magnusson. Fastnar du ofta i tankar kring oro, stress och irritation? Tror du att allt beror på att det är fel på dig? Då vill jag välkomna dig till podden som guidar dig till förståelse om hur vi människor fungerar egentligen. Genom denna förståelse kan vi leva ett liv fullt av kärlek och harmoni. Ditt ljus och hopp när allt verkar mörkt och hopplöst. Så låt nu Daniel guida dig till den stillhet vi alla letar efter. Där slutstationen är välmående och glädje. Lyssna och njut.
Du lyssnar på Human Change med mig, Daniel Magnusson, and when I have an English-speaking guest, I switch really quickly so they don't get confused and think, oh my God, is this going to be in Swedish? But so in this case, I have Damian Mark Smyth, who is a coach and also a fellow podcaster with the podcast Therapists to Millions, and also a best-selling author and a 3-time TEDx speaker. Welcome, Damian. Nice to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me on the show, Daniel. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So tell me, you do a lot of things, and you also mentioned you dancing. So, but let's dive into the coaching and the podcast first of all. Tell me, what's your background in that?
So I better give you a little bit of a backstory. So if I take you all the way back to 2010, I had a seemingly perfect life, a nice big house in the country with 2 kids, and married, and dinner parties every week. But ultimately inside, I was very depressed, and not, something wasn't right. And I even had suicidal tendencies as well, which having 2 small kids is a bit kind of weird. But I started looking at self-development. Having been in therapy, but the therapy wasn't working. And I started looking at self-development, and I came across something called the 3 principles, which essentially was like a shortcut to my health, mental health. So I was going through this therapy, which was telling me, we've got to kind of look at your thinking and work out where it's come from and what it means. And then suddenly I heard someone say, oh, you just don't have to believe your thinking. It was so much easier, really. There's a lot less effort in like just not believing every thought in your head than trying to work out where it comes from and what it's telling you. And that kind of led me to a completely different direction and a different life, actually, ultimately. If you had said to me back in 2011 that I'd stand on stage in front of tens of thousands of people and be talking, doing 3 TEDx talks, sharing the stage with Steve Wozniak, the Apple co-founder, being on the BBC, I wouldn't have believed you. I'd have thought you were absolutely nuts. And but roll forward a few years, and here I am. And it's because I changed essentially the way that I looked at my thinking. That was pretty much it. My thoughts, I still get the same thoughts even now. I had acute OCD at the time, obsessive compulsive disorder. I still get those thoughts now. I just don't pay attention to them. And I pay attention to the useful thoughts instead. So it's almost like cherry picking the good ones and kind of deleting the bad ones. Not deleting it, just ignoring them, actually.
Yeah.
And so when I came across the principles, that was a real eye opener for me. And I wanted to learn more about it, because here was a really simple system for mental health. And as a result of that, I decided, I went to a conference run by a guy called Daniel Priestley in London. He talked about writing a book, becoming an authority in your niche. And I thought, I could write a book about the principles, because that way I could learn more about it. So as I walked up the steps in the Mermaid Theatre back in 2011, this kind of like download of a front cover came into my head, and it said "Do Nothing," and I thought, oh, okay, well, that's an interesting book title, but I like the cover, great big red do and a sort of white nothing, and I couldn't actually read what was underneath it. So I went home, I designed what I'd seen, I printed it out, stuck it above my computer, and I thought, great, okay, well, I'll just fill that book. Well, I've got to work out what it means, but then I'll fill it. And I'd heard that Rudyard Kipling had written 28 novels by writing 500 words a day. So I thought, well, that sounds pretty sensible. So I'll kind of copy that and see what happens. And I woke up the next morning, had a double espresso, started writing. And some days I used to write 500 words, and other days I'd write 3,000 words. But basically, by the end of 2.5 months, I had a book, and I put it out there, and I kind of like gave it to a few people and said, it took me 2.5 months to write, which is quite a while. And they were like, really? It's taken me 2.5 years to write my book. I didn't realize that was actually quite quick at the time, but because I thought I missed a couple of days. Christmas was in there somewhere, and I edited it and re-edited it, etc. But that book essentially kind of opened me up to a number of things. Gave me my first TEDx talk, but by having the signature to my book in my email, and that was like a different story. But and people were reading the book, and they were being changed by it. I remember one time in particular, actually just before I'd released the book, I was in Spain and I was doing the third edit of the book, and I had this really clear like voice in my head saying, just print the book now, get it into print now. And I was like, well, I haven't even finished it yet, but I thought, well, I can always go and update it. So I sent it to print, and a few weeks later, I got this email from someone who'd been in court. They just lost their house, they lost their job, they pretty much, their life was over. They'd gone to commit suicide, and something pinged into their phone saying, there's this new book available called Do Nothing. And he just thought it was hilarious because he was on his way to commit suicide. And he sat down, he read the Kindle version of the book, and it actually prevented him from killing himself. And my hairs on the back of my neck just stand up even now thinking about it. I thought, I wasn't going to release it. And I saved this guy's life. And it was like, whoa, that's pretty cool. And we ended up doing
more than cool.
Yeah. Well, and then we ended up doing a book tour around the country and talking about it. And there was another story where this lady had been in therapy for 28 years. And she, I had a conversation with her, a short conversation about how thoughts work and why you shouldn't have to necessarily pay attention to them. And as a result of, she was stuck in her own village for 20 years, she had agoraphobia. And as a result of that one conversation about the 3 principles, a number of weeks later, her friend called me up and said, oh, she's gone on safari in Africa. I was like, okay, well, that's the opposite then. That's pretty cool. So I started realizing the potential of this stuff as a therapeutic tool, I guess you could say. And I was then speaking with someone who was a business coach and said, oh, you should do this. Yeah, you should be a business coach because you're bringing this mindset stuff with your marketing experience, because my background was in marketing. So I just literally went home that afternoon and set up a company called Rethinking Business. And I actually wasn't called that at the time. It's called 3P Training, actually. And started sharing what I knew about marketing, but kind of interweaving the principles into it. And it was really effective. And that's kind of how I became a coach. And Rethinking Business was then really kind of combining those two and saying, well, if I could help other 3 principles therapists get the word out there, it would make the world a better place. So that's kind of where that was born from. And then kind of roll forward a few years, I started working for the Entrepreneur Circle as a business growth advisor and sharing the principles there. I've done 3 TED Talks on it. I've written other books about it. I've done a podcast on it. And we've literally just recently launched a product called Therapists to Millions, which is all about helping therapists, not necessarily 3 principles therapists, because there's lots of other therapy out there that is actually really useful, like EMDR sort of therapy as an example for trauma. But we're helping therapists get their message out to a wider audience as a result. So that's the short version, but that's condensed.
Yeah. So I mean, it's amazing stories, and as you said regarding the guy who actually thought about killing himself. I mean, it gives me also the chills when you hear the goosebumps of joy, right? And just knowing how simple it can be sometimes for people to see something new. And I think that's the tricky part with this, when people talk about it, and it's like, yeah, okay, so I just shouldn't believe my thinking. Yeah, that's easy to say. And also like, yeah, I know it's my thinking, but then it's, you know it intellectually, but you don't really know and believe it in that sense, right? So,
and the great thing about the process is it's so simple to describe, and people will hear different things at different times about it. You know, when I first heard it, it's like, okay, the three principles are: you're alive, you think, you feel, you're thinking. Okay, so, and that's one way of describing it. Okay, so Sid Banks, who kind of came across it, discovered it, uncovered it, rediscovered it, whatever you want to say. You know, he kind of put it in terms of universal mind, universal thought, and universal consciousness. And that's kind of a level deeper, because actually, if you think about it, the energy behind life has always been here prior to humans existing, right? The energy behind thought, the power to think, has always been here and will always be here. After we've gone, it will still be here. The power to think will still be here, and consciousness will still be here. So he's talking about universal principles that kind of always existed. So now we're kind of going a level deeper. It's like, okay, well, that's interesting, because, you know, you don't have to believe every thought in your head is the tip of the iceberg in some respects.
Yeah.
And put it another way, it's like, okay, well, our experience of life can only come to us via thought. He called it the missing link. So every experience we have in life comes via thought, even ones that aren't true, right? So we can have a thought about something that isn't true, but it's true for us in our thinking. And in fact, actually, if you then go a level deeper with that, there's 7.5 billion people on the planet all having a different experience at the same time, even though the experience is the same thing. Well, that's interesting. All of a sudden now you're starting to go, oh, okay, well, we've all got these things called separate realities then. We've all got a different experience of life. Well, if we've all got a different experience of life, but life is the same, well, isn't that like a clue into this is something quite, you know, profound?
Yeah.
Okay, tell us more about that then. Yeah. So the process is the same, but the result for us is different every time. And even we can have a different experience about the same thing at a different time. You know, we can wake up one morning, we can, you know, look at our partner and we can go, oh my goodness, they're the most amazing person in the world. And then the next morning we wake up, we turn over and they're snoring and we go, what am I even doing with you? You know, we can have the same experience about our bank account or the weather or our dog. You know, it's the event is neutral. Life doesn't make you think about it. Life is neutral. Bacteria are neutral. Car crashes are neutral. Cancer is neutral. Cancer is just the body trying to heal itself, but it's kind of something's gone wrong. But, you know, again, it's our thinking about life gives us our experience of life. Hold on a minute. That's huge. Wait, stop the press. What? Say that again. That's kind of that was the scratch record effect when I heard that. It was like, oh, hold on, wait. What? Say that bit again. Life is neutral, but it's our thinking about life that gives us it. Oh my goodness, that's a game changer, because all of a sudden, responsibility, the ability to respond, goes from life to me. Right? I've taken back power. It's like, oh, I could have a different experience about this. I don't have to think that. I don't have to think about that, or I don't have to respond to my thoughts about that. It's like, it's all kind of this becomes like the all-in-one thing. It's like, oh, but the process is always going to be the same. I am always going to have an experience of life whilst I'm alive, whilst I think, and whilst I am aware of that thought. Because, you know, you can be conscious and not thinking. That's meditation. You can be thinking and not conscious of it. That's called unconscious thinking or subconscious, right? But our experience of life happens when we're alive, we think, and we're conscious of the thought, or we experience the thought and we're aware of it. You know, we can even be aware of our thinking about our thinking.
Yeah.
Well, this is what I sum this up in one sentence, but it's a doozy. It's a writer-downer, right? The problem is not the problem. The problem is not even your thinking about the problem. The problem is your thinking. But that's not a problem. You just think it is. There you go. It's all in one. It's all in there.
Yeah, and that is really twister and so profound and true in itself.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing that makes us not believe it's true, it's also not true.
It's all in there.
Yeah,
it's all wrapped up in there.
Yeah, it is. It is. That's nice. So, and in what way have you seen? I mean, you got these profound insights. But when you met was it your coach first, or was it a therapist, or?
Yeah, so I was actually on stage in it was a guy called Jamie Smart who introduced me to this, and it was on stage in 2012, February the 26th, 2012, in Heathrow, and he actually said a Sid Banks quote, and I can never. I've actually gone through the footage, and I still can't locate whether it was him in one of the breaks saying it, because I can't see it on the video. But it was either it's not what you think, it's the fact that you think, or a step to the outside is a step in the wrong direction. It was one of those two. And it was because he said both of them at that event, but I can't remember which was the one where I turned to the guy next to me and I said, "Did you just hear what he just said?" And the guy went, "Yeah," and he was writing it down. And it was his first kind of time he had heard it as well.
Yeah.
I remember what he looked like. So a tall guy with glasses and bigger than me, which is unusual because I'm 6'1.5". And it had a profound effect on him because I met him like a couple of years later, and it was like at that moment that something happened for him too. And it was one of those two phrases. And what, of course, Sid meant by that was, well, the first one is, it's not what you think, it's the fact that you think. So he's referring to the power of thought rather than thoughts, because we get stuck in our thoughts. But if we don't get stuck in our thoughts, we're letting the power of thought cleanse us. And new thought will come and replace the old thought. So that's kind of profound in itself. But then he also said a step to the outside is a step in the wrong direction. So if we think life is giving us the experience, if we think that we need to control life to give us a different experience, that's what he meant. It's a step in the wrong direction because it's all happening inside of us. It's an inside job, right? We can have a different experience of life by having a different thought about it. And life can't make us think about it. So it's an inside job. So a step to the outside is a step in the wrong direction. So it's all in there. It's all these like very simple phrases are kind of pointing us towards what Sid essentially found as a universal truth, which is that it's all happening inside of us. Amazing, isn't it? It's kind of cool, really, as well.
Yeah, and I mean the changes that are happening in people is amazing, and when it becomes so simple. And one thing that I thought in the beginning, I heard this in 2019, 2020 through a Michael Neal course, and I've been in this field since 2013. So, and reading in 2011, I started to read a lot about these self-development books, and went to trainings and to London in 2012 to Tony Robbins and all these kind of things, but never heard about it. But then in 2019, I started listening to this and going this online virtual training, and I was like, I had to stop. Like, what principles, psychology? I never heard about this. What is this? And also, when you listen to these different and read these books and so on, it sounds like the insight sometimes gonna be so profound, so you stop yourself in the tracks, like, whoa, what was that? But for me, it hasn't. It's been small incremental changes and insights, but I was like, yeah, when will I get the big one? So I hardly noticed that the transformation and change. It went like smooth in a different way.
Yeah.
So I think it's like when people listen to it, these podcasts and books, I think they're like, okay, it sounds good. When will I get it? And that in itself, I think, is blocking us also a lot. We're trying to get it.
Yeah.
Instead of just let it be and keep listening, keep reading, keep exploring, and being open to it. And then, I usually say, stop saying but. Right? I get you, but. okay, I think this is good, but it's like, stop the but.
Yeah, I get it's just my thinking, but
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
yeah,
And because we want to understand, and the more we want to understand, the harder it's going to be to understand, because this is not an intellectual understanding. So yeah. So and in this case, the your new, I don't know if it's called a project or adventure, maybe, the therapists to millions. Tell me
yeah.
about that. What's behind that idea?
Okay, so I mean, as a result of my business coaching, I was picking up clients who wanted the next step in the process. They actually wanted kind of the implementation side of it. And because most of my clients were therapists or coaches, sort of around the, three principles, actually hypnotherapy, NLP, they were kind of those types of coaches and therapists. I actually set up a couple of years ago, I set up a digital marketing agency called Success Formula Club. And we started working with therapists, kind of building funnels targeted at higher paying clients, getting them to write books about their knowledge, and doing TED Talks as well. So basically all the knowledge that I had, I was kind of like passing on to my clients, but then we were helping them actually implement it. And one of my clients, Dr. Susan Spicer, her business transformed dramatically as a result of these changes that we made in her business. And she actually suggested before Christmas last year, she said, wouldn't it be a great idea if we kind of put this into a program to kind of show other therapists and coaches, what you did for me? I said, yeah, great idea. Let's work on it together. And we came up with the Therapist to Millions, and we actually ran an 8-week beta test program for 10 therapists and coaches back in April this year. And the feedback was unanimous. It was like, there's so much content. I don't have time to kind of, I kind of almost like lost track after week 2 because there was so much content. Mm. So we thought, well, what would be a great way to actually deliver this then? So we decided to create a membership site, and we re-recorded pretty much all the material. We put it into a membership site, and then we thought, well, it'd be great to like give away some of this content for free. So we created a starter version. We've got 150 people in our starter membership. And then we were going to kind of release it doing kind of discounts, all this sort of stuff, but we don't like all that sort of stuff. It's all a bit yucky. So we thought, okay, well, we'll do the kind of hand-holding accountability bit, and we'll do it on a monthly basis, starting actually on November the 1st. So by the time you hear this, we'll already have opened doors. And we open the doors for 24 hours, which is actually 50 hours because there's loads of different time zones across the world. So it starts, in Tonga and ends in Georgetown. And it's actually a 50-hour window for the 1st of November. And then we have a $97 membership where we then do the coaching for the month. And this month, which you'll have heard by now, is book writing month. So anyone who comes in, we do a 30-day book writing challenge. Next month is the 30-day TEDx talk challenge. Next month after that, it's 30-day high paying client challenge. So we do a challenge every single month. And for $97, you basically get the coaching, the group coaching, the hand holding, the kind of the daily inspiration and advice. So that's how we've decided to kind of create it in a membership site. But then people can access it at their own time. They don't have to go through it at a particular pace. And then it's all then also about community as well. So that's kind of where we kind of headed with that. But the idea obviously is if we can get therapists to share their knowledge and their case studies and their stories, because that's what the podcast is about, and get out to more people. So for instance, in our podcast, one of our questions is, what's your top tip for mental health in the world today? And, give us some interesting case studies and, how do you market your practice? So those are all questions we use in the podcast, which is a 20-minute podcast. It's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. And that's just kind of, again, helping people, helping therapists, but also actually clients of therapists as well. We've got people listening to the podcast now that are actually in therapy that are listening because they're getting, really useful information in there as well. There's a lot of people that won't have heard of the 3 principles before, for instance. And what we're finding is that if we can raise the level of kind of consciousness of, mental health, even just a little bit, all the boats will rise with it. And that's kind of that's the plan. That's where we kind of want to get to. So Therapist to Millions obviously has a kind of a double meaning to it. It's all about how we can help therapists get their message out to more people, but it's also getting therapists to millions of people. So it's doing both at the same time. It's helping the therapist, but it's also helping the people that need it most. Because, as a result of what's happening in the world right now, it's very easy for people to think, my stress, my anxiety, my depression is being caused by my lack of money, the war in Ukraine, COVID hangover, whatever. But it's not. It's not even being caused by your thinking about that. No. It's actually a misunderstanding that there is, that life is making you think about it. Well, life can't do that. It's impossible. It doesn't exist. It doesn't work like that. Life cannot make you think about it. Your experience of life is happening inside of you. And by opening up the three principles, you're kind of opening up this whole kind of like, oh, I didn't even know that was possible. Well, here we go. And what we're finding is that a lot of therapies that are actually, because therapy is changing, CBD is not CBD. That's the oil.
CBD oil, yeah.
CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR. They've changed dramatically over the last few years, and they're pointing towards the principles now. Cognitive behavioral therapy used to be very much a doing. Now it's very much a watching kind of therapy. It's like, well, have you just noticed how your thoughts change? It's changed dramatically. Hypnotherapy, for instance, is changed quite dramatically now. And it's I think there's a development now in, the standard therapeutic practices that are kind of pointing towards this. You have this innate intelligence. You have this innate ability to heal. It's inside you, and it can come in any moment. The next thought could be the one that gives you relief. The next thought could be the one that gives you insight and wisdom. So I think there's kind of almost like a coming together of all of these different kinds of therapies pointing towards this. Really, I think what the principles is kind of the umbrella of all of it, because they all exist within that.
Yeah.
NLP is kind of a bit of a fast, and hypnotherapy and NLP are kind of a little bit of kind of a fast track. It's like, well, if you don't like your thinking, let's change your thinking. Well, okay, that can be useful. And we've seen it in sport, for instance. It is very useful. But I remember Chris Hoy, the Olympic gold medalist, who had been working with Dr. Stephen Peters all about changing your thinking and, getting these thoughts kind of ready, available. When he broke the world record, I think it was like 2 or 3 times in one kind of session of races, because every person in front of him was breaking the world record, and then he had to go and break it again. And when he got gold medal, he actually said, that moment when he was on the starting line, because someone actually said, what were you thinking? And he said, I wasn't thinking anything. He said, I was in that moment. I was absolutely in that moment. And that's kind of what the principles is pointing to. It's not about changing your thinking. It's being in that present moment and being present to, when we don't have thought, we're in flow. And sometimes when we do have thought, we're in flow. But that's what it's pointing to. It's kind of like a route map, a guidebook for the whole thing. And we're kind of bringing them all together. So that's kind of the purpose of the Therapist to Millions, is to kind of raise the level of consciousness of the entire human race. It's a one-line business plan, but it's kind of cool.
Yeah, and every person that starts to raise their own consciousness, or actually they don't raise it themselves, but consciousness raises. It changes their experience and changing their own interaction with people also, and that can be a ripple effect of it. Yeah. So the more people starting to feel well and coming in contact with their well-being, it will be a good tide wave that would change the world. And it doesn't need to be, it needs to be the 3 principles. I mean, as long as people feel good and happy and whatever works, right? So
absolutely,
yeah. So that's
Sid famously said once. He said, if you're listening to me speaking, and it's like, but you're enjoying life. He said, take the tape and throw it out the window. He said, just go and enjoy your life. That's really what it's about.
Yeah.
And what I certainly found is that I still have negative thinking. It's not about not having negative thinking. Someone introduced me on stage once as, "It's the positive thinking guy," and it was like, no, there's nothing to do with it. yes, I'm happy a lot more of the time, but that doesn't mean to say I'm the positive thinking guy. In fact, if anything, I'm the opposite, because I'm pointing to negative thinking and telling you a little bit about it.
Yeah.
But it's not that you don't have negative thoughts. It's that you just don't have to engage with them. You don't have to entertain them. Viktor Frankl said in Man's Search for Meaning, between stimulus and response, there is a gap, and in that gap lies your freedom. And that's kind of what Sid points to with the three principles. It's not about changing your thinking necessarily. It's about understanding that it is your thinking giving you an experience of life, not life giving you an experience of life. And that's the missing link.
Yeah. The more that happens, and definitely it's going to be such a more joyful life for people. Yeah. So that's interesting. And so the website, people can then join anytime and like jump on any kind of challenge and so on, or...
Well, the challenges are for the professional membership, but in the starter membership, you can go to therapisttomillions.com and you can join the starter membership. It's absolutely free. You get some training in there anyway, which is part of the free training. In fact, how to write a book is actually in there. How to do a TED Talk's in there as well. How to use something called PLR products, which a lot of therapists don't understand or don't realize it's private label rights, and you can actually use other people's material and then put it on your own website to help other people. So you don't even have to create the content yourself, actually, in some respects. So all that training's on there for free. But then the challenges and the professional membership, that's the paid for membership, which launches always on the first of the month.
Okay, so every month it launches. Yes. So
we open the window
even when someone is listening, yeah. So even if someone is listening to this, it's like, oh, I missed that. Yeah, but it's coming up a new month. Yeah.
And then obviously, if you then join the next month, you can still then have access to all the recordings for the previous month. So if you do want to write a book and you're listening to this at the end of November, join the TEDx program, 30-day challenge in December. But then you can also get access to all of the book writing challenge as well.
Yeah. And then maybe people, I don't want to do a TEDx. Yeah, but I guess it's just about having that structure and start building a talk that can be put into any kind of setting. It doesn't need to be a TED Talk, right? Yeah.
I mean, you can use the idea for it, because a TEDx talk is great, because TEDx talks are 18 minutes. So it's a really good way of kind of clarifying your idea worth spreading.
Yeah.
As is the book. We get our clients in the Success Formula Club. We actually get them to, we create a front cover for their book, even if they're not going to write it. But if you create a front cover for a book and you have a title, and you've essentially, like, we call it thingifying it. If you thingified it and create this kind of like, I could like imagine holding that in my hand. What it does is it gives people a real kind of like destination point to go, I could actually kind of write that book. I mean, I could imagine having that book. I could imagine standing on a stage, or I could imagine delivering a workshop, or kind of like running a webinar with that kind of thing there. And that's kind of what we did for, I know you're listening to this, but that's kind of what we did with the Therapist to Millions book. We've actually got a book now, which is part of our kind of promotional marketing. But having that thing in your hand is like, this is something that's going to like last beyond me. This is great. This is a wonderful thing to have. I'm going to still be helping people when I'm not here anymore. So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to write the book. You don't have to do the TED Talk, but it's giving you a destination point to really think about what you want to create. Because this is the other thing that, again, kind of aligns beautifully with the principles. We live in an abundant universe. There's like 60 million new planets being born every single second, which in the universe, which is like mind-blowing if you even think about it. And we live in a very large universe with a lot of powerful creative energy. Well, we're part of that universe. We are not separate to that which created us. We are part of that universe. So we are creators, co-creators in this universe. And when we tap into that creational energy, which is absolutely immense, I mean, it's infinite. We start to create stuff. When people complain about, the lack, it's like that it's that lack thinking. It's not, there isn't lack. It's just they're thinking about life there's lack. Yeah. Whereas we kind of tap into that abundant co-creation kind of energy, which is like, the infinite potential is there. And when you tap into that, see what's possible. People look at us and they go, God, you're creating so much stuff. It's like, how do you do it? Like podcasts and books and webinars and courses and memberships and blah, blah, blah. And we're just like, well, we just tap into the energy and we go with it. It's there, it's available.
Yeah. And the belief that it isn't, that is the only thing that is holding us back from it.
Well, absolutely. If you believe it, that's what you get. What you think is what you get.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can step inside your house and then it's like, oh, I thought it was a man there, but it was actually some coats, right? So in that moment, you thought it because it was true, because you believed it. I like the word thingifying it.
Yeah, thingifying it. We always talk about thingifying it in destination points. So, you get a great story about this is like, if you go on holiday, right, you think about a destination point, and then you think about all of the steps you're going to take to get to that destination point. And then as soon as you buy your ticket, you thingified it. You've got, I've got this ticket and I've got this destination point and I've worked out the steps in between. And you get excited about it. Well, you can do the same with anything. But why don't people do that with their lives? Why don't people co-create their lives? So what we do with our clients is we say, great, where do you want to be this time next year? Well, I want to earn $100,000. Okay, well, that's an arbitrary number. It's like, you've just made that up. Okay, well, why don't you plan your life the way you want to do it? Right. So literally think about waking up in the morning. What do you want to do? I want to go to the gym. I want to journal. I want to meditate. I want to work with these particular clients. I want to take the dog for a walk. I want to play squash, do whatever. Great. So now let's literally plan that life as if it's like your destination point. Then we'll work out where you are now. And then we'll work out what it will cost to get to where you want to get to. And I don't just mean money cost. I mean, sort of time and sanity and effort and energy and all this sort of stuff. But then you can work out pretty simple steps to get there. So that's what we do in the Success Formula Club with our clients. We say, okay, we'll pick a destination point. Okay, now thingify it. So you've now got, and we get people to create vision boards, for instance. I've got one here. We get people to create, what that actually looks like. If you want a book, here's the book. If you want to, do converse, if you want to stand on stage, here's you on stage. If you want to, walk a dog, here's your dog. It's all this sort of stuff. We thingify it. And then we work out the steps. And then when you've got the steps, it's actually easy to then sort of wake up and go, well, I know what I need to be doing today. I need to get up and I need to do X, Y, Z. And then the next day, the same. Now, there'll be days where you don't feel like doing it. But in the same way that any destination point, a plane never goes directly to that point. A boat never goes directly to that point. They always veer off course. Well, if you still know where you're headed, it's much easier to get back on track. So we actually allow people, we actually say to them, it's part of the journey that, some days you're going to wake up and not feel like doing any work. Well, if you know what your destination point is and you know where the path is, you can do that, because then you can just get back on track. When I did my TED Talks, the first one I actually did, I practiced my 18-minute talk. But at one point in my talk, I actually went off piste. I actually decided to kind of go down this other little route, but because I knew my talk and where it was headed, it was very easy for me to then jump back on the route map and kind of carry on again. Which is why it was 18.5 minutes and not 18, because I did this little extra bit about Sid. But again, that's the point. It's like, once you have this destination point and you know the steps, it's very easy to then be less hard on yourself, because we are human beings being humans. We're not human doings, we're human beings. Right. So some days we'll wake up and we'll go, okay, well, the weather's a bit rubbish and I don't feel like it and I feel a bit down. Okay, well, I can just, take a rain check today and I know it's my thinking. So I'm just going to, go easy on myself, as opposed to, I've got to get back on track and I've got to work hard and all this sort of stuff. Yeah. And there's other days when you wake up. Yeah. And there's other days when you wake up and you're in flow. You will do 3 days or 4 days work in like an hour. Yeah, you can do that. And so we allow that, because it's all part of the human experience. And that's part of obviously what we then do in business, is help our clients understand that the journey is actually just as much fun as the destination. If you're waking up and co-creating and writing and creating all this stuff that's helping people, changing lives, it's so nice. It's just so enjoyable to do that. And like this, like what you're doing with podcasts, you're creating a podcast that people are listening to. There'll be some people, hopefully, that will listen to this podcast and go, oh my goodness, I never even knew all that stuff was possible. I could co-create my life. I could literally set a destination point for a year and I could do all these steps. That's wonderful to even know that there's some people out there listening to this right now who are going to go and do that. Yeah. Who before they listened to this podcast weren't even thinking about that. And that's just amazing. And they could now, listening to that person who's listening to that right now and going, that's me. think of all the amazing things you can do for others now by doing exactly that. Think about how good their lives will be if you get your family to co-create their lives and your friends to co-create their lives. It's so possible.
Exactly. And that's when we come from inspiration, I would say it's so much more powerful than motivation.
Yeah.
Because motivation, it's like, more of an extrinsic drive, something that is outside, and we believe that when that happens, when I come there, then I will be happy and successful. But in this case, when the inspiration and co-creating, and you enjoy your moment right now instead.
Yeah, absolutely.
Instead of waiting. Right?
It's all available and it's all here right now.
Yeah. Cool. So I am going to put up the links to the TEDx talks and also to the website, therapist2millions.com, right?
So we got therapist2millions.com is obviously Therapist to Millions. We got successformula.club is the agency. If there's anyone out there who kind of wants help with all of the stuff, we do a done with you and a done for you service. Mm-hmm. And if you want to go to my 3 principles kind of coaching site, it's still available, rethinkingbusiness.biz. There's actually a lovely video, a 15-minute video on the front page, which kind of describes the principles really beautifully. And it's a really simple video, which is available to everyone as well.
Nice. Well, thank you for that. So I would like to thank you so much for taking the time and spreading the energy and inspiration of co-creation. And I was like, I want to co-create more. I want to create more.
My absolute pleasure.
Yeah, and it's like, what is stopping me? Yeah, just my own limiting beliefs of it. That's the only thing, and it's so good to spot it in the moment, and then like, I need to challenge that more when it comes up. So, are there any last thing you wanna give the listeners before we end the podcast?
I think just realizing that there is this infinite energy that is out there already doing so much incredible creating in the world, in the universe. And when I wrote my book, when I tried to force the writing, that was all the stuff that got edited out. The moments where even now I open the book and I read it and I go, wow, I actually wrote that. That's amazing. Was when I showed up and let that energy kind of go through me. And, that's less is more. And this, it's like people hear me and they go, oh, you got this incredible energy. It's like, it's not really me. I'm just kind of the conduit for it. I'm letting it I'm allowing it to come through. So it's not something that you have to force. It's something that you have to allow. And I think that's a really powerful point to kind of get across to people. It's like, you are already it. You don't need to find it. It's already in you. You are it. And this is why things like meditation are brilliant, because what we're doing is we're quietening the mind. This is why things like exercise are wonderful, because we're going out and we're tapping into energy. So it's allowing it. And I think that's a really important, it's easier. There's a brilliant analogy. I can't remember who said it, but it's a lovely one. It's like if you're rowing a boat and it's hard work, and you realize that you're rowing the wrong way, you're rowing upstream. And that's why it's so difficult. You don't have to turn the boat around. You just have to stop rowing. Lift the oars. They call it lift the oars. You just lift the oars and then you'll go with the flow of life. And this is it. Life is already happening. The flow of life is already happening. The creation's happening. If you allow it, you're tapping into it. It requires less energy, not more.
tack för att du har lyssnat på det här avsnittet. Är det så att du uppskattar den här podcasten så får du självklart dela den vidare till dem du tänker kan ha ett behov av att lyssna på den. Det finns också en möjlighet för dig att boka in sig på ett kostnadsfritt coachingsamtal med mig. Det finns inga förbehåll att du måste ha tankar om att bli coachad, utan du kanske har en frågeställning bara så här: det här skulle vara intressant att bolla med Daniel. Så kan jag hjälpa dig på något sätt så gör jag det mer än gärna. Skicka frågan till mig på daniel@humanchange.se. På hemsidan hittar du även videokursen Nyckeln till stressfrihet. Det är en videokurs som jag tillsammans med Angelica Almqvist har skapat. Och det är ett program då för dig som vill ha ett stressfriare liv. Och några vanliga effekter som man kan se efter det här är då minskad stress, oro, frustration och psykisk ohälsa. Ett ökat lugn, välbefinnande, sinnesro med mera. Tack!